I'm Jim Adamski with Roth Sugarbush. I am the outside sales consultant for Roth's. Been with them for, I think it's been about 13 years now, 14 years perhaps this spring. Work remote. I live up in Antigo. Work from my home up there. We have about 10,000 taps. We have a small commercial operation up there. Been making syrup for about 40. I think this will be my 44th season. So we've been at it a while, and I've done a lot of stuff wrong. So I'm more than happy to share some of those experiences with you. So today we're going to talk about evaporator accessories. Okay, we're going to talk about different things that you can put on your evaporator and what these different parts do. Sometimes these really get overlooked. You'll be making syrup for, say, 10 years, for example, and you'll be like, hey, I never knew that existed. So we're going to just kind of go through some of the different accessories that you can put on your evaporator. So who's boiling with a flat pan? Like hobbyists? Okay, couple. Evaporators? Okay, few. All right, beautiful. Okay. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about dial thermometers. Okay, so dial thermometers, and I've got some examples. I'll spin this one out of the pan here quick. We'll take a peek at this. There's a couple different varieties of dial thermometers. Probably the most common on the evaporator is the 0 to 50. Okay, so if we're going to use the 0 to 50 dial thermometer, we want to make sure that when the dial thermometer is put into the pan, that we have at least half of the stem submerged in the liquid. So depending on the manufacturer of your pan, we make stem lengths in 3, 6, 9, and 12 inches. So depending on the fitting height on your pan and the angle that it's going in, you'll have to select the correct stem size and thread size to thread into your evaporator pan. Okay, so now if you're a hobbyist producer, say you don't have an automatic draw-off, the dial thermometer is probably about the simplest and easiest tool that you can use. Okay, so what we're going to do before putting this in the pan is we're going to boil this thermometer in water. Why are we going to do that? We need to calibrate our thermometer or any thermometer before we use it. Every thermometer will boil at a different temperature. Okay, these are a bimetal thermometer. They're very accurate. I'm going to do a seminar here a little later on making maple cream. This is the thermometer that I use for making maple cream. Like I say, they work very good. They're very accurate. Okay, we're going to submerge at least half the stem in boiling water. We're going to boil, and then what we're going to do is we want to set the 0 to our boiling point. Okay, why do we got to boil it? Okay, what changes our boiling point? Atmospheric pressure changes a little bit every day, our boiling point, and our elevation above sea level. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to drop this into the liquid. We're going to boil it. The thermometer is going to go all the way around on the face, and when the water starts to boil, that's when we set our 0. Okay, so what do we know about making maple syrup? Is 7 degrees over the boiling point of water at your location on that day, maple syrup will finish. Okay, so when you look at the face of this thermometer, the first number you're going to see is 0. The second number you're going to see is 7. Okay, that's when our syrup will be done. Okay, so like I say, to zero this out, basically, depending on your dial thermometer, this particular one has a little set screw on the top. Some of them that we sell have an actual screw in the back, and basically you adjust that screw, turn it left or right to adjust that 0 to that boiling point. Okay, now, will the boiling point change every day? Yes, it'll be subtle differences. Okay, it's not going to be a big swing. But if we get it calibrated once and get it in the pan, at least we can make the correlation to how the boiling point is on that day and on that device. So, okay. Another thermometer that you can use, it's a little different option. You can use a 0 to 300. Same way, it's not going to have the 0 setting for boiling point of water, but basically it's just going to be a round thermometer. Basically, it's going to go from 0 to 500. Still want to figure out where the boiling point is. Like I say, every thermometer boils just a little bit different. Boil it in water, nice rolling boil, record your boiling point, and then, like say, add 7 degrees on for the finishing of maple syrup. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about draw-off valves, their purpose, and all of the different draw-off valves that are available. So does anybody use draw-off valves on their pans and evaporators? Okay, beautiful, a lot of people. Just on-off valves, modulating valves, what's everybody using? Off-on, okay. A couple modulating. Anybody use modulating? Okay. So we're going to talk about the off and on. Basically, we have a lot of different options. Really, the one cheap option that we have is we have the just a standard 1-inch valve for the small evaporators. Basically, when we hit our set point, once we go 1/10 over our set point, that valve is going to open itself. At that point, the syrup is going to come out. When that drops back down to the set point, it's going to close itself off. Okay. The biggest thing with draw off valves is we don't want to start what's called a wave inside of our evaporator. Okay. And what a wave inside of the evaporator is, it's differences in your pan and the bricks level. So say for example, this is a syrup pan. I got my draw off on this corner. I'm making syrup. I'm roughly 66 bricks. If my evaporator is working correctly, as I travel back in my pan, and this is a cross flow pan, so my syrup's going to come back, and I'm going to come this way. Usually on the evaporator, I'm going to hook to another syrup pan. I'm going to go back this way, and then I'm going to go back to my flue pan. I'm kind of going backwards through the flow. But every foot that I go back in the flow of that evaporator, my bricks should drop or decline. Okay, if I'm not drawing my syrup off correctly, I'm going to create what's called a wave inside of my evaporator. Okay, what do I mean by a wave? What we're going to do is, so say for example, I draw some syrup off. Say I have a 3x12 evaporator and I draw off 4 gallons of syrup on one draw. My draw off valve shuts, okay, and it doesn't reopen, say for 15 or 20 minutes. Okay. And then after that 15 or 20 minute time period of being closed, it opens up and I draw off another 3 or 4 gallons of syrup. Okay. So what happens is I'm creating highs and lows through my whole evaporator. Okay. So the more accurate I can keep my draw off, okay, and the closer that I can keep that to a continuous flow, the better my evaporator is going to be from a flow point of view, okay? Because I'm not going to have all the highs and lows. And once you get these highs and lows started throughout that evaporator, it's really hard to correct that during the day's run. So, like say, just a simple, quick way, on and off, just a simple, quick way to get everything out of there. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the modulating draw-off valves. So how a modulating draw-off valve works is basically when I have my set point, say for example, say my set point is 219. When I hit 219.1, this valve will inch its way open. Okay. Now, the big thing is with a modulating draw-off valve, when that valve makes that first movement and cracks open, I want to see syrup coming out of that modulating draw-off valve. If you're standing by your evaporator and it clicks 1/10 over, 2/10 over, 3/10 over, every time that goes up a tenth on a modulating draw-off valve, that valve is opening. But if I'm not seeing syrup come out, I'm kind of backing it up, backing it up, backing it up. Okay, so there is adjustment on the modulating draw-off valves. There is a stem on here with a little U-bolt and a couple and 5/16 nuts. You want to adjust that butterfly valve so that when that opens up 1/10, I have a little drizzle or a trickle of syrup coming out of that draw-off valve. Okay, so what we want to do with that modulating draw-off valve is as my temperature increases by 1/10 of a degree increments, that valve opens more. Okay, so it's not just that quick open, flood of syrup coming out, and then close. It's open, 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 open. When it gets to the top side, it's going to stop. As it starts to cool off or the temperature of that pan goes down, it's going to slowly start to close. Okay, the key is when that valve opens, I want syrup to come out right away. Okay, that is really the key with that modulating draw-off valve. So I'll give you an example. I run a 4x14 gas-fired evaporator. Once we get our flow started on our evaporator, say, once we get through the first draw-off, say for example, and we have our flow established on our evaporator, our draw-off valve will open up and it may not close for 4 hours. Okay, that's how it should run. Okay, we don't want to see it open for, a couple minutes, draw off 2-3 gallons, and then close. Wait 15 minutes, open up, draw 2-3 gallons off. The smoother I can keep that flow through that evaporator, the more efficient it's going to be, and the more consistent my bricks level is going to be coming off. So when we take all of our syrup coming off our evaporator, we just go right through the filter press, put it in the barrel. We ship a lot of bulk syrup. We're certified organic. We go into the co-op. They get our Brix report back. All of our barrels are usually like 66.2 to 66.3. They're very consistent. Now, you may not think that's a big deal, but one Brix over on a 55-gallon barrel of syrup is about $50 to $60, depending on the price of bulk syrup. So if I make 100 barrels of syrup and I'm one Brix heavy all season, that's $5,000 I just gave away. So like say that Brix measurement and that consistency coming off that pan, if you're making any volume, is definitely worth looking into and definitely worth looking at. So like say, just improves the efficiency of the evaporator, makes the Brix coming off very, very consistent. So if you are going to run a master style of evaporator that has reversible pans, we have a little different modulating valve that has 3 different probes on, so that we can leave the probes in the pan. And basically what we do is we turn a selector switch here to basically read what probe we're reading on. Okay, so like say we have that available for our larger machines and our flow reversing machines. So that's just another part that's out there. Probe holder. Okay, so with your draw off valves, how's everybody putting the probe in the pan? A lot of people threading the probe in through the port on the side of the pan. Okay, these are really handy. Probe holder. No more threading it through the side of the pan. Okay, it's adjustable basically on your sleeve up and down so that you can adjust it here. It's adjustable left and right. Sits on top of your pan. You can slide it back or forth depending on where you want it in the pan. When you want to change pans, say for example on a cross flow evaporator, simply pull it out of the pan. Okay, it's a lot better option than threading it in the side of the pan every time. So like say, probe holders are a pretty good option. A lot of people don't know that they're around or they exist. So Protecto. So is anybody running evaporator protection on their machine at all? Okay, I run a gas-fired machine, so I have the Protecto kind of integrated into it. So what this is an attachment, basically called a Protecto. Pretty much we sell it as an option on every one of our gas and oil-fired machines. This can be added to any evaporator. So what happens is, if you have a 1.5-inch sight glass, basically this is set up to slide right down on top of an 1.5-inch sight glass. You're going to turn the Protecto on, and basically what happens is the liquid in that sight glass runs too shallow. This thing is going to sound the alarm. Okay, if you put this product onto our oil-fired machines or gas-fired machines, we can actually shut down the burner with this. Okay, so if you're running a small wood-fired evaporator, say for example, you still want some protection on there. I'll be the first one to tell you I've maybe missed a valve during startup on our machine a time or two. So, with that being said, like say you can add this to any wood-fired machine, gas or oil. It's going to run basically off the liquid in the sight tube. The liquid in the pan drops too low, it's going to sound an alarm. Okay, they're relatively inexpensive. I think single standalone like this is like $455. If we integrate them into the burner shutoffs and everything on the gas machines and fuel oil machines, I think we're probably $1,200 front and rear when it's all connected into the burner and all interlocked. So just like say, another one of those attachments that is out there on the that can be added to any evaporator. Okay, defoamer. We have lots of options in the ways to defoamer. Anybody use dry defoamer at all? Okay, few people. So those of you that aren't familiar with dry defoamer, it's just a product basically like this. It's just a dry powder. What happens is we fill this little cup down here on the bottom with our defoamer. We have a piece of stainless steel that's very easy and flexible to bend. So what we'll do is we'll come into our syrup pan. We'll go about 2 to 3 inches over the level of our syrup in our pan. And then what we'll do is we'll just bend this tab over and hold it over the center divider. So what happens with this is anytime that syrup starts to boil up, basically it touches the foam or touches the defoamer in the cup, it automatically drops our foam. Okay, so if you're running a traditional style evaporator, typically what we do is we'll put one about in this position if this is our syrup draw off, and then we'll put one in our flue pan as well. Okay, remember when we're adding defoamer, syrup is always pulled towards the defoamer. Okay, so whenever we're putting defoamer, even if we're adding defoamer manually into a syrup pan, we want to be, if this is my draw off on this side, we want to be putting our defoamer right here, because what happens is when I put that drop of defoamer in, I draw that syrup toward the defoamer. Okay, so if I put defoamer in over here on this side of the pan, say for example, I'm going to draw or pull syrup backwards in that pan, or I'm going to pull syrup basically from both sides toward that defoamer. So just be mindful when we're applying defoamer, especially in a syrup pan, we should try to apply it as close to the draw-off point as we can, so we pull that syrup toward that draw-off. Now, if we're going to be putting these in flue pans, I know when we ran dry defoamer before we were certified organic, we ran 2 of these. We ran 1 on each side of our flue pan. We had a single divider in our flue pan. We ran 1 on each side. So, like I say, it depends on the size of the evaporator, the incoming bricks, but that's kind of really what we did. Very good product to work with, very easy. I mean, if you don't want to look in your pan for foam, say for your flue pan, if you don't want to look in there for a couple hours, that's the product to use. It works very well. So, okay. Defoamer dripper. So those of you that use liquid defoamer, there's a couple different options that we have. So basically, so I am a certified organic producer. So the only thing that I can use is organic safflower oil. That's really my only defoamer. And it's a crummy defoamer at best. So we use the dripper applicators. So this particular one has a bracket on. This will sit right over the top of a float box, so that I run one of these on my back pan. So as my syrup comes out of my preheater and as it's entering my flue pan, I have a small drip of defoamer that gets applied basically to that incoming sap as it feeds through my flue pan. And then we don't have one here today, but we have another bracket that basically just clips on, and I have another defoamer dripper that sits right here over the top of the discharge on my syrup pan. Okay, drippers are adjusted basically by, we have the on position with the little top turned up. To turn it off, we simply rotate it to the side. That pulls the plunger back out. And then to increase or decrease our flow rate, our drip rate, we basically just turn this little dial on top. Very simple, straightforward, easy way to apply defoamer without having to worry about it. I mean, my evaporator, I'll be honest, I feel comfortable walking away for 15 minutes. It doesn't bother me. Everything works pretty well. We have our foam controlled. We have our draw off running correctly. They're not too big of a beast to worry about. So, like I say, just another option. So, that's a great question. I would imagine drippers are probably a couple $100 a piece. And then, like I say, then you get to select your bracket if you want it mounted on a flue pan or float box. Basically, you'd select this one that clips over your float box. And then there's another bracket. If you have a CDL pan or a CDL delayer pan, basically it'll snap right into place right on the front of the pan. And then when you do your pan change, basically you just grab it and snap it off. They work pretty slick. So, you'll buy a dripper. One part number will be with this bracket for the float box. The other part number will be for the syrup pan mount. So, yeah, 2 different brackets, 2 different part numbers. So, great question. Okay. So basically, this is the mount, like I say, for the float box. Going into the evaporator pan. This is going to be where it's going to clip onto the side of our syrup pan, and then it's going to drip right in at the discharge. So, okay, we do have automatic defoamer injectors. Okay, so one of the hot topics right now in the maple syrup world is the use of defoamer and the amount of defoamer residue or the residual defoamer that is actually left in our maple syrup. So right now, shipping syrup into the EU or the European Union, we're having a little bit of a struggle, okay, because they are looking at our syrup as a single product ingredient, which is basically maple sap or maple syrup. And when we ship that syrup in, we have residues or residue of defoamer left in that product. Okay. Now, right now in the US and Canada, there are no parameters as far as how much can be in the syrup. There is no parameters in parts per million. So the problem that we're having is shipping syrup into that market. They're looking at this and saying, hey, we've got other product or another product in there other than just maple syrup. So right now, Center Acer up in Canada. So Center Acer is kind of like the land grant college system in the U.S., like the university system in the U.S. So Center Acer right now is doing a pretty extensive research on defoamers, how much residue or how much defoamer is left in that syrup. So you get to hear my spiel now. So I am the current president of the North American Maple Syrup Council. Just wanted to toss that out there. Last year, one of the projects that we funded through the North American Syrup Council was the use of defoamer and how much defoamer residue is actually left in the syrup. Okay, so last year was the first year of the research project. What they did is they took syrup samples from probably 40 to 50 different maple syrup producers in the US and Canada. They took them in and they analyzed for the amount of residue that's left, or the amount of defoamer that's left after the filtering process has taken place. So last year was year 1 of the study. This year is year 2 of the study. We're going to be doing the same thing. And Center Acer is going to publish the result of this sometime in October. Now, this is going to be kind of a moving target with the defoamer use, because, like I say, there are no guidelines as far as once we get past this threshold, it needs to be classified as an ingredient. So what I can tell you going forward is, just be mindful of how much defoamer that you're putting into the pan. Usually a drop will do it, okay? If I've got a little bottle of defoamer and I'm putting it in by hand, I don't need to give it a big spray, okay? Just usually a drop or two will do it. If you're using the standard, one of the standard maple defoamers, if you're not certified organic, it's going to be like an Atmos 300, very good defoamer, okay? So this particular device is something that has been on the market now for just a couple of years. And what it actually does is we have a probe that goes down into the pan. We have a small ground clip or connection clip that connects to the pan. When the foam in that pan actually starts to rise, it hits this probe, it reads that conductivity, it starts this pump, and it automatically puts the defoamer into the pan. Once the foam level drops inside that pan, that pump shuts off. So this is one of the devices that's coming down the road here that's looking like it's going to be more practical all the time, just to, rather than putting that constant drip of defoamer in there with a dripper, whether we're, putting dry defoamer in, this device here, the doser, is actually probably going to come into play just a little bit more here in the future with, looking at our usage of defoamer and how much of that defoamer residue is actually left in that syrup when we're done. So, yes, sure.
First one is the dry defoamer.
Yep.
When the foam comes up over the top, does it give a lot of defoamer? Is that one of the problems with that? Does it give too much?
No, so what happens basically is when it foams up, basically we're going to get, during the boiling process, we're going to get some liquid that splashes up into here. So basically that dry defoamer turns into a liquid inside that cup. The nice thing is with this, it's, when it gets cold, that liquid doesn't harden up like that traditional defoamer. It stays more liquidy. So, typically if I fill up, like say when I was running our evaporator on this material, I would fill up this cup. I had 2 of these in my flue pan. I could go probably 6 hours before I had to add any back to these cups again. Yeah, just filled it level. Yep. I'm not sure. I haven't tried it. So the problem is though with liquid defoamer is, if you've got an uninsulated sugar house, or if it's like our sugar house, when we get done processing at the end of the day, we turn the heat down to 40. And that stuff's going to get pretty stiff in there, and it's going to take a while. When do we need that defoamer usually? Right when we fire up and boil.
Correct. And I guess going back to what you guys are doing and testing how much defoamer is in there, are you differentiating between the different types of defoamer?
Yes.
And I guess is obviously the organic defoamer you use is lousy defoamer, but does it have more greater or lesser impact on the final syrup?
Yes, so
flavor, things of that nature.
Yeah, so in the U.S., certified organic, we use pretty much exclusively organic safflower oil. In Canada, they use pretty much exclusively organic sunflower oil. Both of those particular oils have almost zero flavor to them. so that, I mean, if you would apply way too much, you will not notice it in your syrup. You know, it's not like a dry defoamer or the Atmos 300. You put too much of that in syrup, you will pick up a real waxy flavor. So they are looking at the studies of sunflower oil, safflower oil, the traditional Atmos 300. Those are the three primary defoamers that they're looking at in their study. And then they're also looking at, how they're being applied, whether it's a dripper or a doser or manual application. So they're taking into consideration quite a bit.
And
so
after 1 year, is there any data back?
there is a limited amount of data. And so we'll see a full release of all that data here in October of this year. Okay, so at the North American meeting in Sault Ste. Marie, Center Acer is going to do a full comprehensive report on it. And then the thing is for our industry is to establish, okay, what is an acceptable level? Because our industry really hasn't established that. And the FDA hasn't established that with us. So I know the IMSI, which is the International Maple Syrup Institute, I know that's kind of more in their wheelhouse is the governmental and regulatory, with the North American side where the research and education. So they're kind of, steering the ship, so to speak, on what the governmental legislation and what, there's two primary food agencies that you're going to have to work with. It's going to be, FDA here in the U.S. and Agri-Canada up in Canada, and the parameters are going to have to fit for basically both. So it's we're just getting started, and it's going to be a long process, but hopefully, like I say, we can get this kind of put behind us. The defoamer limits at this, and we should be fine. So, okay. Anything else regarding defoamer at all? As long as we're talking about it. Okay. Okay, air injectors. Anybody run air injection? Okay, one. I run it myself. Okay. So what does air injection do? Okay, so what we do is we put a series of tubes. This is an air injector that runs through a flue pan on an evaporator. You can see these little humps in the air pipes. Those go around our pan braces, like say this is out of like a 4x10 flue pan. We'd have a pan brace here and a pan brace here, so the air tubes go over that. What we do is we put a small air tube down into each flue. Okay, so air injection actually does quite a few things for us. It slows down the caramelization process when we're making maple syrup. Okay, so what do we know about maple syrup? The longer I keep maple syrup under heat, the darker it's going to get. Okay, that's why if you're boiling in a small flat pan out in the backyard and you're continuously adding sap to it for 4 or 5 days, when you take the syrup off, it's probably going to be the color of my sweatshirt. Okay, if you want to make a little bit lighter syrup, what we do is we blow a little cool air through that syrup. We slow down that caramelization process and we can make a lighter syrup. Okay, so with that being said, that's one thing air injection does. Next thing, we have that steady flow of air down in the bottom flues of our flue pan. What that does is that churns that sugar sand or niter up in the bottom, and it helps keep some of that from burning on. It helps keep that material in suspension, and I can flow that material through that evaporator. Okay? The next thing it does is it's cold evaporation. Okay? So it's adding a little bit of evaporation capacity to our evaporators. So what am I talking about when I talk about cold evaporation? It's like blowing on a cup of coffee. When I blow on a cup of coffee, basically it's steaming. Okay, so what I do is basically I'm putting cool filtered air. So our air injection blowers with the carbon air filter sit in our reverse osmosis room, which is kind of warm to start with, so I want to cool it off. And they're quite noisy, so I put them in there and shut the door so I don't have to listen to them all day. But what I do is I'll blow that low amount of air through that syrup, like say, and what that does is that kind of, like say, keeps everything in suspension, keeps it moving. And then the biggest thing is it's the evaporation capacity. So like on our 4x14 evaporator, I would say that probably adds between 25 and 30 gallon an hour of evaporation capacity. It's not a lot, but we do get a little benefit from it. Now, if you are an organic producer, or if you're having problems controlling foam, these devices are awesome because we're blowing that cold air into that pan. We slow down that heating process. We really keep our foam down quite a bit. Okay. So I know like when we start cooking syrup into April at our place, basically where I make syrup, once I hit the 10th or 12th of April, hours of daylight are getting so long that tree is starting to break dormancy. I know I'm going to start going off flavor. My tree is moving from dormancy into metabolism into bud break. I know by, like, say, the 11th, 10th, 11th of April, my syrup's going to lose its flavor. It's getting harder to boil because my sap is changing. This is one device that helps. You shut that air injector off when you're boiling on the 15th of April, that stuff will crawl right out of the pan. And you turn that back on, it knocks it right back down. So it is another device that does help in the ways of keeping foam down. Now we use them in the flue pan, and we also use them in the syrup pan. So basically, this would be a pan set up like this. There would be another pan here. This would be a cross flow pans. So we have our first cross flow channels here. We have two sets of tubes there. Our next one over, we have two sets of tubes, and then our final one we cut short, and that's going to be right here at our draw off channel. We're going to end our tubes right here so that we get an accurate temperature reading for our draw off valve. Okay, works very well in the syrup pan as well. Like I say, keeps the foam knocked down, keeps it easy to boil. I take tons of videos. I've got a great video on my phone that shows channels without the air with air injection and channels without. So nothing new. It's been in the maple industry. I think I've been running it for probably close to 15, 16 years now or better. So it's nothing new. It's been around for a long time, but it's one of those pieces that not everybody knows about. So
If you have them, always have to use them, or is it adverse if you have them and you're not running them while you're boiling?
yeah, so if they're in your evaporator and you're not running them, what's going to happen is you're going to layer a layer of niter over the holes in the air injector. They're very, very small, very fine holes. And if you're not running air through them, you're going to niter them up right away. And that's one of the things too, so we do a complete acid wash on our evaporator probably about every 20 drums. Syrup pans we're running, 3-4 hours on a syrup pan, we've got to change. Flue pan doesn't come off only about every 20 barrels. But at that 20 barrel limit, there are some times where we need to take a drill bit and we need to go back into the holes of that air injector and touch up those holes just a little bit if they're nitered up. And, having it in pan acid overnight didn't take all the niter buildup off. We may have to get in there and drill the holes out and open them up just a little bit because they will build up with niter. So if it was in the machine and you weren't running it, it would plug up relatively quickly. So. Steam, you probably wouldn't need it because steam, we're really heating it in a different fashion. We're heating the coils, and basically all of our niter buildup is going to be on our steam coils when we're boiling with steam, whether it be a steam pan or tubes through a pan, depending on what you're doing. All of our niter buildup's usually on the coils. We slow down the caramelization process quite a bit that way in steam. So with steam, we make a lot of light syrup. It has a very light flavor. So I run air injection in my evaporator, but to keep my flavor, because I'm making that lighter syrup, I run my evaporator a little bit deeper. So I'll run 2 inches over the flues in the flue pan, 2 inches over the, 2 inches of liquid in my front syrup pan, instead of, running that down to 1 inch and 1 inch, and really getting that evaporation capacity. What I want to do is I got that air injector in there. I'm slowing it down. I'm keeping my color light, but I want to maintain that maple flavor, so I want to keep it in there longer to draw out that maple flavor, so I run the pans just a little bit deeper. I slow the evaporator down, in essence, by doing that. Okay. Pan cleaners. So there are a lot of different, anybody using any automated pan cleaners or pan washers? Okay. So those are some devices that are out there. We have several different types of pan cleaner. We have our traditional Roth pan cleaner, which is our phosphoric acid. Works very well. If we're shipping acid, we usually ship this stuff here. It's a dry material, our dry pan cleaner. We can ship that anywhere. We don't have any hazardous material charges. And then we have another material here called SaniClean. This is a little bit different formulation of the phosphoric acid. So when we put this into a pan washer, an automated pan washer, it won't foam up, okay? If I put this type of pan cleaner into a pan washer, it'll fill this whole room with soap suds for you. You know, so if you are going to run an automatic pan washer sometime down the road, this is the type of pan cleaner that you want to look for. If you are experiencing really heavy niter buildup in your evaporator and you're really struggling to get it clean, and you've traditionally been running the regular pan cleaner, it wouldn't hurt to try some of this. Buy a gallon or two, check it out, and see what you think for the difference. You'll know right away when you pick up the jug. You know, this stuff here is probably 9 to 10 pounds per gallon. This stuff here is probably closer to 15. It's a really heavy mixed product. It works very well in some of them stubborn situations. So, like say, just some different options in pan cleaner that you may possibly not know about. So, float box gaskets. When was the last time you changed them on your evaporator? People usually overlook these. Okay, they're relatively inexpensive. If you want to maintain some accurate levels in your evaporator, you know, put them in. I get a lot of calls in the spring of the year, and you know, the float box gasket's kind of halfway disintegrated, and they're having problems maintaining level in pans, and they're not sure what's going on. You know, that's the first question I ask is when was the last time we changed that gasket? And usually that's one of the last things that people look at. So if you haven't already put your evaporator together for the season, you're going to be doing it shortly. Check it out when you're putting it together and just kind of take a look at it and see what it looks like. So, okay, sight glass kits. So sight glass kits can be added to a lot of your small evaporator pans. This is just a picture of one of the universal sight glass kits that are available. You know, so if you have just a regular traditional old flat pan and you'd like to add a sight glass to it, you know, we have these kits that you can add, you know, basically right into your draw off. We can add that sight glass kit in there. Just one of the things that we can add. I just got to check my time here real quick to make sure I'm not getting too carried away here. Okay, hydrometers. Okay, this is one of the tools of the trade that everybody uses. Okay, we have basically two versions of hydrometers. We have our regular hydrometers, and then we have our Vermont state certified hydrometers. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, standard hydrometers come right from the manufacturer. They are never tested. Okay, so that hydrometer may read 66.2, 66.1. It may be just a tick off. Okay, we usually say that hydrometers are a reference device. Okay, they can be used as a final measurement, but we usually look at them as a reference device. Okay, for a few dollars more, you can buy a state certified hydrometer. Basically, what happens is these hydrometers are shipped from the manufacturer to the Vermont Department of Agriculture. These hydrometers, each individual hydrometer is tested. If it falls within their parameters, 66 bricks liquid reads 66 bricks. It gets the stamp of the state stamp from Vermont on it, and it gets put back in the box, and it goes back to the person that delivered it there, you know, whether it be CDL or one of the manufacturers. So two different hydrometers. Like say, hydrometers we typically say are a reference. Okay, so when we talk about hydrometers, two lines on a hydrometer. Okay, we have our hot test line. Anybody know what the temperature is on the hot test line? Beautiful. Cold test. You got it. Okay, so 211. Why do we call it 211? So by the time I take a hydrometer cup under my draw-off valve, fill it with syrup, take my hydrometer, lower it into my liquid, the temperature of that cup of syrup is usually around 211 degrees. Okay, that's why that hot test line is at 211. Okay, now if you are going to start using your hydrometers for different temperature liquids, say you want to test it at 180 degrees versus 211, there are compensation charts available. Okay, as the temperature cools off, the reading of that hydrometer and how it sits in that liquid is going to change. So there are compensation charts available for hydrometers for other than that, other than the 211 or the 60 degree temperature. Like I say, we use them as a reference usually. Okay, a better tool, of course, to do that with is a refractometer. Okay, like I had mentioned before, one brick's off on a barrel of syrup, $50 to $60 on bulk price. It adds up in a hurry. So two different ones that we can use is we have our sight glass unit. These are automatic temperature compensating. So what we do is we put a drop of liquid onto the lens. We look through it. It'll tell us the bricks of that liquid. Be mindful that when we put that drop of liquid onto this lens and close the cover, we need to give it a little time. Okay? We need the lens to become the same temperature as the sample of syrup. Otherwise, our reading will not be correct. Same thing is going to play into example when we're using an electronic one. When we're using an electronic refractometer, you put a drop onto that, shut the cover, give it a little time, wait for the two samples to, or basically the glass of the refractometer and the syrup sample to become the same temperature. When I'm using this machine here, an electronic, I hit that button 3 different times, probably throughout the course of a minute. Okay, if I hit that button 3 times and I get the exact same reading 3 times in a row, I know that is my reading. Okay, if I put a drop on there and I don't wait for it and I hit go, what'll happen is sometimes I'll get a reading that'll be 1/10, 2/10, or even 3/10 of a bricks different. Okay, so we need to make sure whichever device that we're using, give it just a minute, let the syrup and the lens become the same temperature before making that reading so that we're getting the most accurate reading that we can. So is anybody using refractometers at all? A couple people? Okay. This is the other thing that goes along with it. Calibration solution. Okay, so if I have a SAP refractometer, I can calibrate that with distilled water. Okay, very simple, very easy. If I'm going to use a syrup refractometer, whether it be a automatic temperature compensating handheld, I should be purchasing this material here. This is a calibration solution. I put that onto my lens of my refractometer. I close the lid, and it should read 66 bricks. Okay, it is a known bricks. It is a known substance. This is made by Center Acer, that university system up in Canada that I was speaking of earlier. They make that calibration solution. Like say, it's just a great guide to have it. If you're going to use an electronic, depending on the manufacturer, some can be calibrated with distilled water. Some will use that calibration solution. So unfortunately, there's a couple different manufacturers of this one here. Like say, some will use distilled water, some you'll need the calibration solution. Okay. There is. It is. It's no different than a temporary grading kit. You know, a temporary grading kit, if you're not familiar with those, it's the little 4 bottles in the wooden container. You know, after a period of time, they fade. Okay. Same thing with refraction, calibration solution, whether it be for pH meters, refractometers. That media is only good or has a shelf life of so long, and once we get past that point, it starts to go the other way. So, and that is, through their process, they're the ones that say, okay, it can be good for, X number of months, or it's good till this date when it's manufactured, and that's it. Because once we get past that, it falls out of their parameter. So I know, trust me.
You buy a bottle, use a couple drops, and
yeah, exactly. Or a year or two, yeah, it's gone. Yeah, same thing with calibration packets for pH meter. Oh, I'll just pick up a couple extra, and then you go to use them. It's like, yeah, it's a year old already. So yeah, no, I understand. So okay, pan jacks. Okay, basically pan jacks. It's kind of hard to see in the picture. This is a picture of a 5x10 flue pan that has 4 of these jacks and casters on. They clip right onto the side of your flue pan, jack the pan up, roll the pan right off the evaporator. Okay, makes it easy to clean. Okay, if you are going to run, and I don't know if I got a picture of it, we also have these available for the side of your crossflow pans, or for master evaporator pans. They clip to your arch. Whoops. They clip to your arch. They hang under here, and you can jack these small pans up, or like the master pan. They're like a 3-compartment pan like this. That jack will clip on there. You can lift it right up and drain them out. So we do have some pan jacks available for different applications. Like say, these are just some of the things, like say, that people might not know that are available. These are especially handy when it comes to cleaning it. Roll it right off, lower it down, get right inside with a pressure washer. You're not fighting the steam hood or anything like that. It makes it really, really easy to work with. So stainless steel bulkhead fittings. Okay. One of the things, we see a lot of, in sugar houses. How many people have a tank in the sugar house that they've ran over a time or two? Come on, you can raise your hand because we've all done it. So come on, Ben, you had to have run one over. I've ran a lot over. So we have stainless steel bulkhead fittings. So basically, these can be put into any stainless steel tank, and we have them in poly as well. They can be put into any stainless steel tank or any poly tank. You can put an overflow in that tank with a pipe that runs outside. So if you do run the thing over, it's not running all over inside your sugar house. They can be added, to, like say, to any stainless steel tank. We have them for the poly tanks. They can be put in just about anywhere. It's just a great little piece that, like say, if you want to add an overflow into a tank, for example, if you want to tie two tanks together, say, for example, when this first tank gets full, I'm going to go out this overflow and I'm going to fill my second tank. You can put one in each tank, connect tanks together. Like say, just one of those devices that, you might not know is out there that, is pretty handy for that. So spare syrup pans. We get a lot of people that'll buy an evaporator that won't buy spare syrup pans. Okay. And it's just that shutdown time basically to clean it. So I have a complete set of spare syrup pans. I only really use one at a time. I do have a whole complete set if I need to back it up. But like I say, it's just one of those pieces of equipment that you have there. I can grab that spare pan. I can make the switch. I can keep right on boiling. I don't got to shut down if I've got a lot of sap to run. And I can clean that pan while my machine is still running yet. Pans anywhere from $900 to $1,100, just depending on the size of the evaporator. Pretty good investment. Makes pan changes really quick. Pretty good investment. So, okay. Manual stack temperature measurement. So we have brackets that you can purchase that'll pop rivet right onto the side of your stack, whether you're running a wood-fired machine, gas-fired machine, whatever the case may be. Basically, what that'll do is you'll drill a hole into your pipe, pop rivet this on the side, and we can thread a stack temperature gauge right into that stack so that we can monitor that stack temperature. So we have this as a manual option, okay? I don't have a picture of it on here, but we have electronic stack measurement as well. It's going to go in the same way. It's going to have an LCD display that you can put up toward the front of the evaporator by your firebox. Keep track of that stack temperature, know when to be firing, whatever the case may be. So that's one thing that, like say, a lot of people don't look at is stack temperature when it comes to efficiency. There's usually not, there's some magnetic ones that you can stick onto some of the old stacks, stainless steel. They don't work very well. So like say, just a couple different options between manual stack temperature measurement and electronic stack temperature measurement. Drip trays. So what a drip tray is, a drip tray bolts onto the side of the evaporator when you're running a cross flow syrup pan. So what we do is we take all of our valves and our fittings off. We tip that pan, and when we go to change the pan, all the syrup will run out of this pan, and it will run right into that drip tray on the side of the evaporator. Not all, we're not trying to place buckets on the floor to, keep track of what's going on there. Everything runs right into the drip tray. It's got a central drain down in the bottom. Once the pan change is complete, open up the valve, run everything out of the drip tray, pour it back in the pans, spray it out with some water, and you're all set to go again. So, like I say, just one of those things that is out there for the different size of evaporators that you can put on or add on to different evaporators. Yes. It really depends on your evaporator. Okay, so I can tell you this. If you're running a wood-fired evaporator and your stack is gunmetal blue, it's too hot. Typically what we see, if we look at that stack temperature, measuring it up basically about 4 to 5 feet off the arch rail, we should be running 775 to 850. That's basically going to put that stack at a light gold color. Well, after we've ran it a few times, that stack's going to be that light gold. Like say, if that stack on that wood-fired evaporator is gunmetal blue, you're sending all your heat up the chimney. That stack temperature is way too high. So I can give you some correlation to that. So our stack temperature on ours is about 740, 750. We had stainless specialists out on our gas machine at that temperature on that 4x14 machine, looking at the combustion, looking at the CO2 discharge. That machine was running about 78% efficiency at that stack temperature burning natural gas. So wood's going to be a little different. It's going to be variable. But like say, if that stack is blue or black, we're running her too hot. We're not getting that heat wrung out of that before we send it up the chimney. So now like our master evaporators, they're a little bit more efficient. That's a 2-pass system. You know, the first pass we travel underneath the flue pan on a flat surface. We come up under our syrup pans, and then we discharge through our flue pan in the back is not a flue pan, it's a tube pan. And then we travel through that tube pan to wring the heat out the rest of the way before we get up the stack. That machine will run a stack temperature of about 400 to 450. We wring pretty much all the heat out of that machine before it sends up the stack. So very efficient machine. So, okay, pan washers. Great way to clean evaporators. I know we have freestanding pan washers. If we look at the master evaporator, these are usually sold with the automatic pan washers. Automatic pan washers can be purchased on the deluxe machines. It's like, say, deluxe oil, deluxe gas, intensifier. Pretty much any of those machines could be set up and set up with the pan washers. Okay. The more we keep that evaporator clean, the better quality of syrup we're going to make. Okay. The more of that hard, brown, burnt on niter that we get on our flue pans and our syrup pans, that transfers into the flavor of our syrup. The more buildup we get on that machine, the more we get that flavor into our syrup. You know, so what, and that's the other thing that's going forward. You know, if you haven't purchased a new evaporator in probably the last 15 years and you're going to look at purchasing a newer evaporator, stainless steel is really thin. Okay. In order to get the efficiencies and the burn rates on evaporators, we have thinned up the stainless steel. You know, when I look at the evaporators we ran 20, 25 years ago, you could throw a pile of heat under there, you wouldn't hardly burn the pan. But we, you know, so what do we know about stainless steel? It's a very poor conductor of heat. You know, so to get that, you know, to get that heat conducted through that stainless, the stainless has definitely gotten thinner. By having that thinner stainless, it gets hotter. We got to clean our evaporators more often. You know, so just kind of food for thought. But there are automated washers available for both flue pans and syrup pans, depending on the style and size of the evaporator. If you're going to put it on after the fact, if you didn't purchase it from the factory, there may be an opportunity that your pans will have to go back to the factory to have the fittings and the ports put on. So just kind of keep that in mind. But if you're ordering a new evaporator from the factory, you can, or even if you don't order the washer, the last time that I ordered pans for my machine, I ordered everything ported and set up for all the washers. So when I want to add it, basically all I got to do is add it in. So pan washers for like our cross flow pans, these are just a small freestanding washer. We can wash 1, 2, or 3 pans at a time. So they'll build it. This is just a single pan configuration if you want to wash 1 at a time, or we'll build this a little wider and we can wash up to 3 pans at a time. This is an option where we would use that SanaClean acid, that heavier material that's non-foaming, because we're going to be pumping it and spraying it through the spray bar. We want something that isn't going to foam, or we're going to fill our sugar house up with soap suds. But these pan washers are available for our syrup pans. You know, if I don't want to put an automated washer on my evaporator, I can at least put this on after the fact and just set a pan on there and wash individual pans. Fitted hoods, like say hoods, you know, we have all kinds of different options as far as suspended steam hoods or fitted hoods. So like say those options are all available for evaporators. And that kind of concludes the evaporator parts or evaporator options.